Why traders, what is going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Dogecoin DOGE on that ticker, Dogecoin. Starting off in the weekly right now. Very nice defense on this weekly of these exponential moving average with the long downside shadow. Huge tapering off volume, and we do have about 2 days left on this chart before we actually close the weekly for a Dogecoin. So just want to talk about a few different setups right now. Specifically want to look left and talk about how this setup actually compares to what we see here. So essentially what we're looking at, if we do look left back into the summer of 2022, had a little rally, a pullback, and then a huge spike, and then a little bit of pullback before some sideways chop consolidation action. Obviously, this was more or less still in a bearish formation, as you can see by these exponential moving averages. So resistance in between 26 and 50 period EMA, and resistance, resistance, resistance. So we're not necessarily expecting that since we are in a weekly bullish formation right now, especially a very nice weekly bullish formation with the price sitting well on top of these exponential moving averages, especially after blowing up, pulling back, having a very nice back test and confirmation of these EMAs as support, and then a very nice continuation and follow through with an exceptional amount of nice bullish volume coming in for Dogecoin. So if something similar does play out where we actually have our big run up and a pullback setting a higher low and then more or less some sideways chop action, that's actually not a bad sign and setup right now. If we do see something similar, allow these EMAs to catch up. And then ultimately, if we do end up zooming out, we would be looking at more or less of a big Wyckoff accumulation pattern. So if we do look at this as another type of consolidation, longer period point as we do head into the summer and even potentially the fall, this would set up for a very, very nice phase D to phase E breakout, which is exactly what we want to see, which would kick off a very, very nice altcoin season like we are hoping for and hoping that we get. So if we actually look at this weekly chart as well, just want to put the emphasis on how the exponential moving averages have been such a good signal and guide this whole time on the weekly. So specifically on the first time, we were getting a lot of resistance in between the 12 and 26, as you can see here. A lot of resistance time on this weekly. Eventually had the very nice bullish candle like we were looking at, and that pretty much established the 50 then as a big, nice point of resistance. And so not necessarily expecting that we're going to get to it right now because it is so far below the current prices, but typically when we do have a very nice upside move with a big air gap in between the price and the EMA, typically we do find support on the 12 period first. Usually we do kick off and confirm that level as support before pulling back and finding it off the 26. And then ultimately, once that fails, then usually we do find it on the 50. So very nice to have three levels kind of as that parachute to the downside. But right now, still maintaining a very nice weekly structure. And a lot of these weekly candles do have very nice long lower shadows on them, showing a lot of buying. So anytime price does start to pull back, we do see bulls show up. And despite the fact that we do have decreasing bullish volume coming in, and we have seen decreasing bearish volume coming in as well, for the last several weeks as we do see this pullback. So starting to get a decrease in selling pressure. So we're getting some sellers exhaustion as we do align with some supports here. Obviously looking left, we're looking at a lot of supports and previous resistances on this. And even if we do want to turn on VPVR volume profile visible range here, you can see that price right now is sitting above the weekly big point of mass, obviously before dropping down below the 10-cent level. So right now, big point of mass coming in about 14.2. And as you can see, very nice period of support here. So let's draw a price level, for example, right at 14.2, you can see. And then even up to potentially, we're looking at support coming in at previous resistance, 15, just above the 15-cent level. And then above that, we would be looking at weekly closing resistance coming in about 15.5. So if we do turn off VPVR, you can look left here, just see how perfectly it aligns with all of this previous price trading back from November of 2021, pretty much until we started seeing more pullback around the spring of 2022. So right now, the fact that we have multiple weeks on top of this level, very good sign for long-term growth, especially as the exponential moving averages do kick up. We would love them to see a very nice point of support on this zone. And especially since this is kind of like what we talk about when we do like establishing levels, just like we established on the way down that this was a very, very big period of support and then flipped it into resistance. So this has been confirmed as a technical level. And then obviously on this big candle that we saw in October of 2022, big period of rejection as well, right in between the 14 and 15 cent levels. So with that though, if we actually go ahead and talk about just the size of these upper wicks on the candle, a lot of selling pressure. So looking at a big tested point of resistance, obviously price was pushed back under the 50 period EMA for this weekly. So we're looking at prices sitting below the 12-cent level for Dogecoin. And then as we can see, we could be looking just slightly below that as the next support point. So right now, this does align in between the 26 and 50 period. And if we look at the current weekly candle, we actually had a price dip below this 12 period. For the low of that, we're looking at 11.984. So getting down to this level, but obviously not being able to break it and then not being anywhere close to the downside support right at 11.1 cents just yet. But we know if we actually do lose 12-period EMA support, then what we would be looking at would be this level. But one of the things that we're expecting right now, especially with decreased sellers exhaustion and finding support on this current zone right now, is just the formation of a bounce, a little bit of upside move. And whether or not we actually do make a new trend high, we will see. But even like we talked about coming off of this big move, especially being a similar type pattern that we saw, even if we do go into a little bit more consolidation, still a pretty good sign overall for longer term growth. So even if we do find some upside gains, we would be looking and expecting right now a lower high to be coming in before pulling back and trying to form a higher low, which seems pretty extremely likely right now, given that the low, like we talked about, is 11.98 cents. So assuming we do get a little bit more upside and follow through, I would expect this to be the low and probably confirming some support before actually heading back to the upside. Now, do you want to look at the technicals here, specifically stochastic RSI, relative strength index? So we'll talk about RSI in a second, but first I want to talk about the stochastic RSI because right now this oscillator is pretty steady and pretty reliable in the sense that on the bottoms, once we see this bullish cross, nice upside move, and typically that does reflect in a nice upside direction of price. So even back here had a nice bullish cross when the stochastic RSI oscillator was below the 20 line. Very nice upside move as we did see, and then that pushed price back to the upside. Similarly on the tops, we actually did see period of the stochastic RSI above the 80 line, bearish cross, and then obviously a big pullback or retracement rather. And that is the time when the stochastic oscillator went back down, kicked off the supports like we're expecting. So that's pretty much what we're at right now, is the last stage of trying to get the stochastic oscillator. And keep in mind that since this is the weekly chart, we're not expecting it to play out here anytime soon. So probably about a week or two before we actually see stochastic RSI get below the 20, where we are starting to see a little bit more upside move. But we know that it is typically pretty reliable once we actually do see a little bit more upside pressure on the stochastic RSI, that usually this does rub off into a little bit more of that bullish upside price action. So if that does get confirmed, then we would expect the next leg of upside to be coming in for Dogecoin here. And like we said, it doesn't necessarily have to be putting in a new top and trend high, because likely the good scenario for longer term growth, especially in this longer term altcoin season, would be to actually consolidate along this level, confirm this point in between 14, or actually rather 15 all the way up to the 22 to 25 cent level as very nice support and a longer term growth, probably with the heart line of that coming in right around 18 to 19 cents, which is also the big period, actually right around 16 to 16 and a half is the big period of support and resistance we saw previously back in the end of 2021 to the spring of 2022. And so now, even looking at the RSI itself, even though it's not necessarily as important in my opinion right now as the stochastic RSI, still pulling back from a very nice overbought level, dipping below the moving average for this RSI here, which isn't always the best sign, but still maintaining a very nice uptrend on the stochastic RSI, putting in a low, and then higher low, also a high, higher high on the RSI as well. So still good signs, still showing a lot of strength on this longer term chart. So things are looking good from a structure point of view. And like we said, just this overall accumulation pattern, especially since we have been looking at it for a few years now, is shaping up very nicely for a longer term growth for a Dogecoin. Now flipping over into the daily, very nice daily candle coming in, and especially with 40 minutes to close left, could actually see almost a Marbuzu type candle coming in, which would be a very good sign. So we'll see if there's any sell-off pressure. We do know that the exponentials are a pretty resistive zone, though. If we do look left, big period of resistance, specifically right now in between the 50 and 12 period EMA. So since we have gotten this bearish cross and confirmed it as resistance, this is a pretty big zone that we're actually looking at. So we'll see how, and the candle that closes and also the follow through for tomorrow, we are actually looking at. Also, a big point of previous price support for the close on the daily coming in at 14.75. Looking left, we can see just how supportive this was for the close. A lot of lower shadows, but we are looking at plenty of candles. So we're looking at a total of 7 bars, so 7 days, so a full week's worth of candles so far, finding support on top of this level before rejecting off of these EMAs, and then ultimately pulling back, breaking the support level, and now we are about to test it once again. So Would love to see a break and close above this level. If we do find it in the next 40 minutes, that'd be even better as we do close this daily candle, especially looking very nice without a lot of sell pressure coming in just yet, and almost a non-existent so far. But we're looking at not that much bullish volume overall as well, so not necessarily that much strength. So hopefully if we do see another day of upside, we will get more volume and more fall through coming in, especially as we start to test these resistive points that were previous support. Probably one of the scenarios that we could end up seeing is a resistance from the 50 and 26 period EMA, but if we do break above this 14.75 level, we could find more or less some sideways price action trading, kind of like what we experienced in this instance of some inside bars and more or less sideways chop, but not necessarily that much directional magnitude. And ideally, we would love to keep testing this level as resistance until ultimately we would be able to break it, especially assuming that 14.75 does hold up as support. However, above that, we are going to have a pretty strong resistance level as well coming in for the day, sitting in between 16.23 and 16.3 cents. So looking left, big period of confirmed resistance that also aligned with these previous exponential moving averages. So we are going to assume that that's going to be a strong resistive level as well. And so that's another reason why we need to see a lot more bullish volume and follow through coming in, especially after confirming a new lower low on this daily trend coming in. So if we do end up confirming these as a very strong resistance and also can't break above 16.23 or 16.3, then that's pretty much going to confirm that we're likely going to experience another downside test of some of these supports. And so for a daily longer term closing support, we would be looking at the 12.85 level, as we can see big period of support, especially after confirming not only the price level support, but also the 50 period EMA as well, before flipping it into this big period of resistance. So big period of confirmed support, once again, as you can see by these lower shadows. So prices dip below, but a lot of buying push prices back up on top of that for the close. So 12.853 is going to be extremely relevant. And that's why even if we do hold on to a resistive zone on top of this level, we'd still love to see a little bit of consolidation and hopefully in that instance, another test of an upside direction for the bulls. Otherwise, we will be continuing to test this downside support and likely seeing lower lows put in. However, I don't think that's the likely case right now to see lower lows, and I do want to pull up some technicals just to talk about that for a second. So specifically looking at the RSI, looking at a very, very longer downtrend that kind of more or less forms this falling wedge for RSI, and now we're kind of getting a little bit of a breakout. So especially after seeing a low put in for RSI at 33.24, not quite below the 33 line to show oversold conditions on the daily, but still knowing that we're going to need a lot more upside direction in this instance. So plenty of opportunity to see prices get pushed back up without having the RSI be that far extended into overbought levels. So this is actually a pretty good setup overall because we allowed the RSI to cool down and actually have prices more or less have a big opportunity to see upside gains. So even though we have retraced quite substantially and we're looking at almost a 50% pullback on this move, very normal for what we see at a lot of altcoins right now. And so having this RSI at one of the lowest levels that it's been in a while, and if we look, every single time it has gotten down to about this level, we have had our bottom put in, and then we typically get some more upside. So even looking left, even previously back in the fall when we did have our initial rally, big point and big move after we almost got to oversold levels for Dogecoin. So almost to this level, and for example, 12th of October looking at 31, and then even the next lowest that we were looking at coming in on 7th of January, 34.07. And so ever since have had a very nice period of upside. So with that too, looking at the stochastic RSI at the bottom, every time we do get some chop below the 20 line here, very nice upside direction, and typically that leads to more upside gains. So right now getting a little bit more of that chop, which we do see, and then typically, especially since it correlates to this level of RSI, expecting a lot more upside pressure from here, especially after confirming this type of bottom and support for the daily chart here. So overall, we are looking at a pretty nice V-shaped recovery so far. Typically, when we do see sell-offs like this for a lot of cryptos, they kind of stagnate, don't really have much going on, and then ultimately continue a sell-off direction. So to see this much upside gain, despite not having that much volume, could be a potential sign that we might struggle, but that's why we are going to really look at volume as we do come in, because overall, we have seen a huge taper off in all volume, but bullish volume as well, which is what we want to see coming in, especially on these moves when we're trying to confirm a bottom and a reversal. So really what we're going to have to see besides bullish volume is just a rally up, pulling back, and then setting and confirming that higher low before finally rallying up and breaking some higher highs. Realistically, I probably see it putting in a new higher low before running up and trying to attempt this 16 to 16.5 cent level. I think that seems a little bit more likely and probable, especially given this minimal of bullish volume here. If we do see a huge influx in bullish volume, then obviously that case could change. But realistically, otherwise, I would expect and probably would be best to see a confirmation of this resistance, because when we do break through it, that means likely we would be able to flip it into support in that instance before taking off once again. And so with that, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show on Dogecoin, DOGE on that ticker, Dogecoin, whatever you want to call it. Do hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Don't forget to drop me a comment down in the comment sections below. Issues, predictions, comments, disagreements, all that stuff. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. Or feel free to reach out over on Twitter or X at @coin_trades is the handle over there. That is going to wrap it up for now, though. Do appreciate all the continued love and support. Thanks. As always, stay safe, take care. Coin traders, and I'll catch you back in the next video.